Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the third day of our Open Education Symposium. My name is Fernando Marin, and I will be your host. Our talk today is the seventh of 14 exciting events of our symposium. We're honored and thankful to have Debbie Feist, Kim Frail, Denis Lacroix, and Lawrence Stiglitz here to talk about Pressbox, your springboard to interactive learning. They are all from the University of Alberta Libraries, and we have a wide range of expertise in science, education, humanities, Indigenous initiatives, and library studies. So we have a lot of expertise here to share with you today. A quick general note, if you haven't done so, please make sure to read our speaker bios on our website, our catalog of OERs, and following the spirit of openness, make sure to visit and contribute to our, or should I say, your summarized links and notes. Remember, you're welcome to comment and add. That's all the notifications that I have for you today. So without further ado, I'll leave you with Debbie.
My name is Debbie Feist, and welcome to our session on Pressbooks, your springboard to interactive library learning. So here you see our happy faces. These are our presenters today. And this session, as Fernando mentioned, will focus on several library Pressbooks used by both education and Bibliothèque Saint-Jean librarians, as well as science librarians, and their practical applications as OER. We're going to be speaking about our experiences creating and using open learning objects with the Pressbooks platform to deliver course integrated library sessions. So myself, Kim, and Denis, we all work in the areas of education and humanities, and Lauren works in the sciences. So what is a Pressbook? I'm going to delve into a little bit about what it is, and then I'll also talk briefly about a Pressbook that I've been involved with. So Pressbooks is an online authoring platform used within the University of Alberta Libraries open education publishing program. So we do have staff that work within this area. And Pressbooks helps support the values of openness and sustainability in scholarly communication. Pressbooks is widely available to Alberta post-secondary institutions through the Open Education Alberta program, which itself is a no-fee publishing service for open textbooks and other open educational resources, or OER. Pressbooks is also available through other organizations across Canada and other areas, of course, too. But some specifics that you'll have recognized include BC Campus, eCampus Ontario, and the University of Saskatchewan. So we're not the first by any means, but we're sort of jumping into it. Pressbooks allows authors, could be, instructors, faculty members, librarians, to create ebook content that can include images, videos, and even interactive material like quizzes and tutorials using what's called the H5P plugin. As well, the Pressbooks can be downloaded in a variety of formats, which can be very useful. In line with the concept of open educational resources, authors can develop their resources over time, and as well, they can easily add collaborators to contribute to the material, which is a process, of course, that aligns with the fundamental premise of open educational resources. Currently, within the Pressbooks directory, there are over 2,100 open Pressbooks in that directory, and they cover a wide variety of areas, as you can imagine. And they also include a wide variety of licenses attached to those resources. So you can go ahead, you can search within that directory, and you can find items and pre-existing Pressbooks to go use, reuse, adapt. So it's we'll include those links in our presentation so you can have a look at that. In terms of the tutorial that I was involved with, I'll talk a little bit about that. And it's a tutorial that was created for students to learn about APA citation style. So in September of 2019, the University of Alberta Library completed an assessment of its library instruction program that's embedded in first-year education classes, specifically compulsory undergraduate courses, including EDU 100 and EDU 300. So each year, several library staff teach approximately 20 or more face-to-face workshops in these courses, and those courses are actually offered each term. So our analysis of student feedback revealed that about 25% of respondents wanted more help with citing an APA style. An APA style, citation style, is used within education and also other social sciences. When we presented the findings to faculty, they echoed the need to be able to address student anxiety about citing. And we decided that the most scalable way was to provide this targeted instruction to these 20 plus sections per year was to create an online tutorial. And at that point, we were fortunate to be able to hire sessional librarian Sarah Adams to, among other things, create this tutorial. So how was it created? Key to this creation of our tutorial were the online APA citation course modules that were already existing and produced by Norquest College Library. So Norquest College, also located here in downtown Edmonton, and the staff at the Norquest College Library were willing to share their content with us under a Creative Commons license, and as well, they were willing to share their instructional design process. And having these resources allowed us to significantly shorten the instructional design process for our own tutorial on APA 7th edition. Our timing worked out well as we identified the need for this tutorial just before the transition from the APA 6th edition to the 7th, which also occurred in the fall of 2019. And we tested a number of publishing platforms, including iSpring, Articulate, and Pressbooks before we decided to use the Pressbooks platform, which is open source software. Not only was this project unique in that it was using already existing a longer sort of online modular course, but the APA tutorial that we created was the first time that Open Education Alberta Publishing Service was used for creation of library teaching materials. So just a few details about the APA tutorial that were created before we move on to look at other areas. So this tutorial is designed as a 30 to 45 minute self-paced resource. And the structure and content of the tutorial was designed with education students in mind, but of course, it can be used by any institution or faculty that wants help with APA citation style. The tutorial was published in April 2020, and as you know, this coincided, just happened to, with the transformational move to online learning that COVID-19 required. Locally, this timeframe also aligned with the significant budget cuts to education funding here in Alberta. So far, this tutorial has had over 3,600 views, and as well as 2,600 unique visitors to the tutorial. And these numbers are growing daily as the tutorial is being integrated into more and more courses, particularly, of course, online courses. So Lauren will now join us to talk about Pressbooks designed within the sciences. So I'll stop sharing my screen and Lauren will take up at this point.
I'm a science librarian and I've been using Pressbooks. Oh, my screen is just taking its sweet time. I've been using Pressbooks to reach large group of students in the sciences. As a science librarian, there's a few challenges with reaching students. For the undergrad, we have a lot of very large classes that can be, difficult to teach in, or we have big classes with multiple sections, and it's just not possible for one science librarian to visit all these classes. For grad students, I tend to do a lot more one-on-one with students, and I teach in some classes, but again, there's no easy way to reach all grad students in a department in most cases. So really using Pressbooks for online tutorials is my way of meeting some of these challenges. So I'm going to talk about two different Pressbooks, and The first one is a tutorial I did for 200 level biological sciences courses. So in these courses, they have their library assignment in the lab section. And this means it's really unsustainable to do any in-person instruction because I would be looking at visiting 20 to 40 classes in 1 week, which is just not physically possible. And but speaking to the lab instructors, there really was a need for more library support for these classes, that students still need to learn these skills. And it just so happened that, again, this project coincided with the move to remote learning. So they required something that worked with remote learning and was also asynchronous, and something that could fit, well, they could go into the LMS e-class. So I proposed making a Pressbook for multiple 200 level classes. So I worked with all of the 3 lab coordinators for 200 level classes to get feedback on the content. I took a typical in-person instruction session and translated online, and I added interactive elements. And it's currently used in pretty much all second year biological sciences courses. And the reach is about 1,300 students. That's the enrollment for all of the classes together. Of course, there are students who are in multiple classes, so that's not an exact number, it's an estimate. I'm just going to show you what it looks like. So this is what our Pressbooks look like if you haven't seen them. This is the home page. You can click Read Book to just jump right on in. You can also scroll down and look at the contents. So you can see this book covers sources of information, navigating journal articles, how to search, and citation and avoiding plagiarism. So very, very standard things. And I'm just going to show you what a Pressbook looks like inside. So what things do we have? So this is the anatomy of a journal article, and this is one of our interactive elements. So here's my journal article, and I have pop-ups about, what is an introduction, what are references, etc. So we can have these cool interactive things as well as text, etc. And we can also see our contents at the side. So it's a really great tool. And back to my presentation. Next up, I did a tutorial for physics research. There was a need for more instruction for students in upper level undergraduate and graduate courses who were starting to do research. But again, it's not really possible to do course-based instruction for that many courses or number of students. But there was a need for this. And again, this happened last summer, so it worked with the move to remote learning. And more importantly, this needs to be something that is not directly course-based. So I needed to make a tool that could be easily added to different courses, but wouldn't be, directly tied to one course. And again, something that we could put into eClass as needed. So I made this tutorial. I worked with faculty to get input. I translated instruction to online, added the same interactive elements, and it was shared with every grad student in the department and added to eClass courses. So this is more for like a general subject area as opposed to specific courses like most of the other Pressbooks we have. And I'm just going to quickly show you what that looks like. Similar format. Again, we can look at different things, look at, the pieces. And this is another example with a lot of pop-ups in our interactive. So how can you tell if something is legitimate, not legitimate for a predatory publisher? So lots of cool tools that you can use in a Pressbook to make things interactive as well. Okay, so now that I've made my Pressbooks, I accidentally clicked my hyperlink again. That's the problem with hyperlinking everything. So how do I know how well this is being used? Well, one of the benefits of Pressbooks is that we can set up Pressbooks authors with Google Analytics reports. So on our site, we can get all the Google Analytics. So we can set you up to get a monthly report of all the analytics for your book in the month. And I'm just going to go over the kind of information that I can give you, and then an example from one of my books about what kind of information that tells me. So for the monthly report, I can see the number of sessions, so total visits, individual users versus new users. So I can see, are newer people accessing it, or is it more repeat visits, and use, how is it being used? The bounce rate, which is how many people just look at one page and leave. Pages people view per session. So when I showed you my Pressbook, I just showed an individual page. Or what we call chapters in Pressbooks as well. We can also see the average time people spend in each session as well. So kind of cool things about how it's used. And then sources, where are the visits coming from? So most of them are direct visits where people are directly clicking the link, but we can also see visits that are coming from OER repositories and other places. So for my book, I had last semester 2,000 visits and about 1,200 unique users. This number is a little inflated because it is unique IP addresses. So if I'm accessing at school and at home, well, that's going to count twice. So that is inflated a little bit. But you can see that if there's an estimated 1,300 students in these classes, that is a pretty good number of uses. Also, people were looking at about 7 pages per session and taking about 6 minutes per session as well. So I can see that, okay, people are looking at multiple pages and they are having relatively long sessions. And this can give you a lot of really useful information about how your book is being used and how it's being used over time, because I get a new report every month. So pretty cool. And finally, sources. I can see where people are accessing as well. So most of the hits are from direct links from our open access, like Open Education Alberta page. But we can also see hits from repositories. When you publish an OER in Pressbooks, we do add it to other open repositories so that other people can find it. And I've seen hits from eCampus Ontario's Open Library and OER Commons, which is letting me know that other people are finding it. And interestingly enough, I also saw a couple uses where someone had shared my Pressbook on a blog and I got a couple hits from that. So you can see even broader uses that you may not have thought of before. And now I will switch it over to Denis.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my presentation. And I'll be presenting you how I've integrated Pressbooks in classroom teaching. And my perspective, of course, is as a librarian. So over the course of the summer, I decided to tackle on Pressbooks and create 4 Pressbooks. I don't think I started off with the intention of creating four Pressbooks, but that's how it developed. So 3 of my Pressbooks are in French. And the first one I started with is actually Debbie Feist and Sarah Adams' Pressbook, which I decided to translate. This Pressbook, which was already mentioned in this presentation, deals with the APA's 7th edition. So I translated it into French, and I think it was a good start because it allowed me to get used to Pressbooks, to learn how to build a Pressbook without actually having to start from scratch. So that's what I did, and the APA citation style is used in all of the education courses. So I knew I was going to be using this book for sure in the courses. The other 2 French Pressbooks, one relates to teaching information literacy in humanities and social sciences, and the other one is specifically for education students and teaching them how to find programs of studies and authorized resources. The only English Pressbook I created was for educational psychology, and this is the one I'm going to use in the next slides as examples. And I can share the bibliographic information to the Pressbooks in the chat if that interests you. If you want the links, they're in the chat. So the reason for creating the Pressbooks was for implementing a flipped classroom approach. This is something that was on my mind for many years, but I've never had the incentive nor the context that would favor a flipped classroom approach like the pandemic did. Unfortunately, I guess. I needed that situation to prompt me to do this. Anyways, I created these 4 Pressbooks to allow students to learn most of the basic information asynchronously outside of the class using the Pressbook, and then meeting synchronously in an in-person virtual classroom meeting to deepen their understanding of the contents of the Pressbook. So the next few slides will be addressing that, how I did that, how it worked. The other option for using the Pressbooks is also for the traditional one-shot library session, which we do a lot in the library. So instead of preparing a PowerPoint, well, I can use a Pressbook as well. I can't go through the entire Pressbook. There wouldn't be time usually, unless it's the class is an hour and a half. I might be able to get through most of the Pressbook then, but it can replace my traditional PowerPoint. So that has worked. I've used that in that circumstance. But for the asynchronous portion, of course, it's self-paced, it's autonomous. Students go through the Pressbook. It usually takes them an hour and a half, sometimes more, depending on how much they already know or don't know, sometimes less if they know quite a bit. And it depends also if they watch all of the integrated videos and they do all the exercises. So if they do absolutely everything and they're diligent, it might take them more than an hour and a half to go through the Pressbook. So there are integrated videos. There are also interactive screenshots. So I can show you maybe the interactive screenshot first. This is the Educational Psychology Pressbook, Chapter 2 on Library Catalog, searching for known titles. And the interactive screenshot is this one. So you see little eyes. This is for more information. These are hotspots. So when you click on the hotspot, information appears regarding that element of the image. So that's the interactive screenshot. The other one is the H5P exercise, and I think Lauren mentioned H5P before, and H5P is simply a software that is integrated into Pressbooks for creating interactive exercises, hands-on exercises. So I'll show you in Chapter 2 again, my 2 exercises that I have for students. The first question is a multiple choice. So it just asks students to search for a ebook title and to figure out whether it is print, is it an ebook, is it both print and ebook? I believe it is both print and ebook. Yay, I got it right. And question 2 is a different type of question where students need to interact with the image. So they have to select the place in the image where they would click to find the full text for the ebook. And, you know, they would click on the link and they get the correct answer, hopefully. So this is, of course, follows from the other pages that would explain how students can find this information. So this is just an exercise to test their understanding. I have a question in the chat regarding is H5P difficult to learn within Pressbooks? it is not difficult at all. I think, like anything else, it takes some getting used to, but really, after you create one exercise, it's fairly self-explanatory. There are many different types of exercises in H5P, and I have not used all of them. So it takes a little bit a little bit of time to learn. Different exercises are a little bit more complex. These two exercises are fairly simple to use. There are others that are more complex, so they take a little bit more time. But you have to play around with them, and of course, looking at different examples from what my colleagues have created is really helpful. And yes, I see in the chat that somebody mentioned that there are tutorial links. Yes, that's true. So
There was another question there in the chat. Joanne had asked if the questions and activities can be interspersed throughout the text rather than presented as a quiz near the end.
Oh yeah, of course you can insert H5P exercises at any point. It can be embedded anywhere in the Pressbook. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. Oh, video creation and storage. So the videos that are integrated are videos that the library created beforehand that exist outside of Pressbooks. So the videos are not stored in Pressbooks. I'm not sure if Pressbooks has the capability of building videos. That I'm not sure about, and I haven't used that function. But I integrated videos that the library we created beforehand. Yeah. So for the synchronous portion of the course integration, this is how I've organized the synchronous in-person virtual meeting with the students, and there are different ways of organizing this, of course, but this is how I start off. Is I poll students on the completion rate, and I'll show you what the results are of that. So I poll students on their completion rate, on their understanding of what they've seen in the Pressbook, and really the goal of the synchronous session is to address student questions. So really, ideally, they would have gone through the whole Pressbook, and then they would have questions that I could address during the synchronous session. And then I highlight different aspects that I think are particularly useful for students to remember for completing their course assignments. So they could be the eClass library block that exists with different tools that students will likely use, library guides. Also, I highlight that the Pressbook has a glossary that I created, and that can help with the terminology, because as you probably know, the library has a lot of terminology that might confuse some people. So having a glossary is really useful. And you'll see a little bit later, I have some statistics. The students do take a look at the glossary, which is surprising, but yeah, they have. And there's also a Library Ask Us service that students should remember to use. I also created a worksheet for the in-person meeting with students, just to have some exercises for them to complete during the session, and to highlight some search strategies that are particularly useful for their course. So this is what I wanted to show you next. So this is the poll that I've organized for Educational Psychology 501. I asked students if they've completed the reading and the exercises. Yes, no, they started or haven't had time to finish, or other. Here are the results. So for Educational Psychology 501, most of the students have either completed or started the lab manual. Only 15% have not started going through the manual. And these are the other questions I have for them. What did they like most? What did they like least about the lab manual? So in terms of results for what students liked the most about the manual, what was repeated most often is the interactivity, the exercises, the hands-on exercises were really appreciated. The videos were also mentioned quite a few times. So those are the key elements of what students really liked. What they liked the least, of course, it's the length of the press book. Some of them found that the press book was very long. I guess it really depends on the students' familiarity with the concepts. So if everything is so new to them, then yeah, it's going to take quite a long time. They have to watch everything and read through everything. The other issue is with students downloading the press book. So some of them have tried to download the press book as a PDF. So when that happens, I believe that the interactivity, the press book loses its interactivity. So the exercises might not work if they download as a PDF. I believe the videos, all the links should remain active though, so they should be able to do that, but the H5P exercises probably won't work as far as I know. So that's probably what they were commenting on, that that's what they didn't really like. And the last question, of course, is what question they have for me. So I'm looking at the chat for some questions. So can students create videos inside Pressbook? I believe not, but I haven't really looked into that. Maybe some of my colleagues have and can jump in. Maybe if they want to jump in the chat, that would be great. So this is an image of the worksheet that I've created for students during the synchronous session. I start off with highlighting where they can find the most useful resources for their course. All of the education courses, e-class courses, have a library block, and librarians mostly have adapted the library blocks with resources that are pertinent to the course. So in this case, for 501, SAGE research methods is a staple. So I have to include that, as well as links to databases, library guide. But of course, the press book is also linked within eClass there. So that's how I start the worksheet. Then I have some exercises, so I get students to work through some search strategies and share how they organize their concepts, keywords, and they will enter that into a Google spreadsheet, so I can take a look at their search strategies and maybe make some comments there. So that's how I've used the worksheet for the synchronous session. That's building on the press book, because the press book is quite general. So the worksheet intends to bring some really more contextual information for their course assignment. So this is my last slide, and it relates to usage of the press book. Of course, the press book is mostly used at the beginning of terms. So I have an image at the top of the slide where you can see that at the beginning of the fall and beginning of the winter terms, that's where there were spikes in press book usage. I think Lauren mentioned this, alluded to this, that you can see how much time is spent on average for each section of the Pressbook. So chapter usage, and these are chapters that have been used for 2.5 minutes to 6 minutes on average. So the chapters that are mostly used are the ones dealing with searching for information, for searching databases like PsycInfo or searching the library catalog. But I think what is consistent with student feedback is that they really like the exercises. So the chapter exercises are in the top pages that are being used. So this is not surprising. They really like the interactivity. Okay, so now I think I'll hand it over to Kim, I believe, who will be taking over from me. Thank you.
I won't take very long here because I wanted to at least leave us a few minutes for questions, but we were very strategic in that we placed the theory at the end after you got to see the tool. So I'm glad we did that. So in our conference proposal, we were asked to list the OER related values associated with the presentation. So we provided them on this slide. These values have been weaved throughout my colleagues' presentations, but it's helpful to talk about them a little more explicitly just to connect them with why you might choose to go the OER route for library information literacy learning for your own course or your own course resources. So, and hopefully my colleagues can also provide some additional links to the helpful OER resources that I'll be listing on these slides in the chat while I'm speaking as well. I've seen the 5R activities of open content referred to a few times in presentations during the symposium, so that the very obvious ones here that they've touched on, the retain, revise, remix, reuse, and redistribute. So I'll talk a bit about that. I'll touch on sustainability as well as the ability for self-paced autonomous learning. So the first thing I'll mention is the ability to clone here. So that is when you're taking a Pressbook, an existing Pressbook, and modifying it. So yeah, the ability to modify or clone. And in the case of the APA manual, it's already seen some clones. It's already spawned some clones, as one might say. There is an APA version here it's been cloned by Kwantlen Polytechnic University in Surrey, BC. And of course, as well as Denis has already mentioned, there's a French version here internally within the U of A. So that was great in terms of language, being able to quickly translate a Pressbook. And this is the ultimate in the reuse, redistribute network. There's sort of a triple action happening. Norquest, whom Debbie mentioned, Norquest College at the beginning of this presentation. It's a good illustration of the circular arrows in this icon because it began with Norquest. As you might remember, Debbie mentioned that we had borrowed their content as the basis for the original Pressbook. And now they're going to be basing a new Pressbook on ours. So that's really come full circle. So that's great, real continuous cycle of reuse. And we have here some book information that you would see on the OER website, the provincial website, which is on the next slide there, the links. One of my colleagues might be able to pop the link in the chat, but I'll speak about it on the next slide. You can see the book source here. So it says, this book is a cloned version of the APA style tutorial by Sarah Adams and Debbie Feist. So it's very clear when you're looking in these listings, which book has been cloned. So that's getting back to those 5R activities. So when something is a broad interest or high use appeal, like all of the examples we talked about in this presentation, there's a higher reuse potential, obviously. So we had in each of those examples, large classes or APA as broad use, high appeal in terms of something that many classes would be interested in. So that goes up. So that is most apparent when the topic has that high use appeal. So it is possible to use it for a small class or a seminar, but the reuse potential would go down there as well. We've talked about the clones and the ability to modify the clones. And this is the listing I was speaking about, the Pressbooks directory, where you can find other Pressbooks as well to clone. And you can actually see in the listing, I don't think I have time to get into it right now, but you can actually go into each book and see that listing that I provided on the last slide. If it's actually a clone, you can actually filter and limit by books that are based on other books. So it's really quite fun to get in and play around. In terms of the licensing around that reuse, the information is made available on the Alberta OER Pressbooks site. You just have to look at the collaboration agreement there, and it will go into the terms of use. If you weren't able to attend the copyright and OER session yesterday, it's worth seeking out that recording, as our copyright librarian Amanda Walkerup actually went into the details of a Creative Commons license. So that would be helpful to check out as well, as that collaboration agreement does reference Creative Commons licensing agreements. And just finally, my colleague Debbie had brought to our attention, there are traditional knowledge labels for Indigenous content that are available as well. Some of those icons referring specifically to sharing that type of content. And we've included that link for you there if that's something that's of interest. So I'm just going to quickly move through this because I know we're right at time here. Sustainability. So if you're thinking about would an information literacy press book be appropriate for my course? As I mentioned, we've got that thinking about that broad use appeal versus specialized seminar small classes. It would be possible to create a press book for a small seminar or specialized course, but it would be more sustainable in terms of the time investment and all of those things when we're looking at those larger classes, like Lauren had alluded to in terms of those large undergraduate science classes. There are lots of other library information literacy tools, video tutorials, subject guides, recorded lectures, virtual handouts, live sessions. We have many, many other options to offer as well in terms of doing that information literacy component within your classes. So check out our library teaching and learning page for some of those options too, as you're making that consideration. And then finally, just that autonomous learning piece. I think we've touched on this throughout most of the presentations. You've got the potential for asynchronous learning that's apparent there. As Denis had alluded to, that flipped classroom approach, and this is sort of where I come in. I had used the APA book in a class in education with EdFX 498, internationally educated teachers, and having those interactive pieces already ready to go is just perfect. And even inserting them, the pre-work, that flipped classroom within eClass, inserting that directly within eClass, saying go to chapter 1, do this activity, worked out really, really well. Denis also mentioned those H5P activities and that potential for eClass integration. We've got a few links listed here in terms of the IST knowledge base articles that kind of outlines integrating those into eClass. According to that article, which was from June of 2020, you cannot, they won't integrate with the grade book within eClass, but eClass is constantly being upgraded. So it never hurts to check if you're keen to look into that aspect of the grade book. But between those two articles, you should have enough information there. But if you are looking for some more, please start by contacting us via the library publishing email address. Our publishing team will be happy to hear from you. My colleague Michelle, who is from the Digital Initiative project librarian that's part of this team, is on the call and has been responding in the chat. And the other person to loop in would be your subject librarian. So the link is there as well to find your subject librarian. So thank you so much for participating and for asking questions. And that comes to the end of our presentation this morning.